there's people that thank you, Peter. When we talk to the people at Camp Jury, they do not have a backhoe.
What?
Yes.
Well, I don't even know where that is, so I don't know what the soils are.
It's right next to Warden's Pond.
Oh,
Yeah,
Same as last year?
Well, it's on the other side.
Oh, all
yeah,
right.
exactly, yeah.
Up in the Moraine.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, we can, we can work something out. I can try to get a crew, hand dig a hole or something. As
well,
long as I
that's what
can
we don't know if we could get it because their prices are all over the board. It's a lot more massive than we thought it would be. They said, well, you have a choice of 17 cabins. I mean, they house what, 300 kids a week per summer? So it's a big to do.
I mean,
Right.
another option is, like Rent a Center has them for like 200 a day or something like that. If worse comes to worse, but
We just have to find someone that knows how to operate it. Do you?
yeah, I can do it, or Eric Bodker, or
Okay,
I can do a Kubota or something
Well,
small.
the other thing we could potentially put out amongst all of our volunteers, if somebody does have a backhoe or knows somebody with a backhoe, would be willing to bring it in? And
and they live close.
yes,
Yeah, we may have some farmers in the area.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, welcome everyone, and this is the soil section of the Enviathon. And after this one, we'll be setting it up for both aquatics and wildlife. One will be on the 6th and one will be on the 15th. So I will be sending out a notice either later today or tomorrow morning to apprise you of it. And our regular meeting will be next a week from today. And here and anywhere else, I think we'll be having it up at the Northern District office at 3:30. Unless that's a conflict, Pete, for 401 gives. No.
no.
All right, Jim, it's all yours. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
Danny.
Go ahead.
Any questions, please put them in the chat. This is very informal. So as we go along, please chat. Can Robin hear us? She just can't talk to us?
Yeah, she can hear.
Okay.
And Robin, I'm curious if you got new students that haven't had this, or oh, you do. Okay, all right. I don't want.
Oh, yeah. They sent them all off to school.
Okay. All right. And I mentioned to Pete, every now and then my computer does explode and I have to do a unplug and reboot. So if for some reason I stop talking, Jillian and Max and Allie can hop in and vamp for me for a little
I heard they were gonna tap dance.
bit. Good. All right. And I'm going to turn off my video just in case that causes some issues.
Peter, you got up to screen share?
What's
Yep.
that?
Yeah, he's all set.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Stop video. All right. I'm just going to switch to PowerPoint. Yeah. And I'm not sure if I can see the questions, but somebody chime in and let me know. Share my screen. Again, as mentioned, this is informal, so I'm going to kind of whiz right through it. And if there's any questions, just stop me. So I'm the Assistant State Soil Scientist for the USDA, Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service. My email, that's my wrong email. It's just jimtureen@usda.gov, but it should still work. And the website for the soils study stuff is on the link there. Just throwing out NRCS and our wisdom has changed all of our websites. We got a new fresh look to our web pages, which means that no links that are probably in that presentation to NRCS will work. I will work probably as soon as we're done with oysters next week to update those links. Every 4 years or so, we change all of our websites and it creates dead links all over the place. So I'll get those up, or just Google if you're looking for something. Let me go into full screen mode here. Again, this is one of our exam sites and how it will look probably in May when we're out there, hopefully, if we can get a backhoe. So I'll just cover myself talking about our agency, Natural Resource Conservation Service. Our motto is helping people help the land. I always say and water too, because now we're doing soil mapping underwater. These just a list of our priorities. I had to update this from the old administration. Now we have some new one, and you can see number 2 there is addressing climate change. So hopefully at the end, we'll have some info on how NRCS is doing that. And we basically provide technical and financial assistance to private landowners to achieve these goals. So we're kind of different from most federal agencies in that we work with private landowners, not on federal property. For the Envirothon competition, the test, it's a combination of 3 sections. We have multiple choice, fill in the blanks, questions about soils. To answer those, I recommend just reviewing all the online material. This PowerPoint is uploaded and Pete will provide it up on the website. So review the website. The recording will be up there if you something you miss. The other part of it is having people hop into a soil pit where you will describe the soil profile, horizon, color, texture, and also make some interpretations, answer questions about that soil. Is it well suited for agriculture? Has it ever been plowed? Where is the water table and stuff like that. So that's the kind of the second part. And then the third part, we have a printed, what's called a custom soil survey report for the area that the Envirothon will be held in. And you're going to have to locate yourself on the map, determine what the map unit is, and then know how to use that custom report to answer questions about the soil. So I can send an example of what we had last year to take a look at it. But it's basically just how to use a soil survey report, which is pretty much what I've been doing for the past 35 years, is making soils. So again, study everything on the Rhode Island Envirothon site. Getting into it, soil science is also called pedology. I'm a pedologist. Hard to tell people what that means when I tell them that, but we often have to explain why we study soils. It's the scientific study of soils, including their origins or formation, genesis, how the soils form, the characteristics, chemical and physical properties we look at in a soil. We record, hundreds of different features in a soil when we're doing what we call a full profile description. And the uses of the soil. So the main reason we make these soil surveys is they provide land use interpretations, over 90 different interpretations we have in our current web soil survey. And there's a lot of different fields of soil. You can be a soil physicist, a pedologist as I am, soil mapper, soil chemistry, soil biology, and that sort of thing. So why do we study soils? Again, to provide these interpretations, what soils are best used for what purposes for humans there. So again, we have over 80 different interpretations, suitabilities, and properties. This is just an example. I don't know if we can see my mouse, but this is a Narragansett's profile. That's our unofficial state soil of Rhode Island. We have official state everything except soil. So we'll be talking about these layers, horizons, colors that you see, and how this soil formed coming up. And again, just always have to reiterate why do we study this dirt, and why is this important? All of these different reasons here. Sorry, one of the main ones is this one I got circled: carbon sink. Earth soil contains 25,000 gigatons of carbon. More than 3 times the amount of carbon in the atmosphere and 4 times stored in living plant and animals. So soils, basically, when it comes to climate change and trying to keep carbon in the ground, soils sequester a lot of carbon. I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about some of the stuff we've done in Rhode Island for carbon. Carbon is king, I always tell people when it comes to soil. Definition of soil: it's a natural body that occurs on land, water also. We map soils into water now. Occupies space and is characterized by one or both of the following: You need to have these, what we call soil horizons, and they're formed by pedogenic or soil forming processes. That's additions, losses, transfers, and transformations. I don't know how to turn off my team meeting from keep popping up with reminders, but it's very annoying. And it also has to have the ability to support rooted plants in a natural environment. So dirt is basically soil removed from its natural environment. That's the stuff you wash out of your clothes and get out of your fingernails there. Just a little section of what we would call a soil ped. It's a mixture of mineral material, microbes, a lot of microbes in a soil, organic matter, water, and air, all kind of mixed up there. So there's a certain percentage of each in different soils. In this profile, you can just see these beautiful example of soil horizons. I see some nice columnar structure in the soil. So just a nice example of what a soil is. Where do soils come from? This is soil genesis, or soil formation. Gentleman up here on the left is Hans Jenny in 1930. He developed the 5 factors of soil formation, which kind of move soils from more of a geology mixture to its own pedology sort of thing. So when we look at this outcrop, this is a cut in the soil that we see, very steep here. We notice there's biology, there's plants, animals living in and on the soil. So the different biology that we have, microorganisms, the different vegetation, we have different types of soils in a coniferous forest versus a hard green forest. So that's one of the factors of soil. Other one is climate, how much precipitation a soil gets. You're going to get major differences between a desert soil and a rainforest soil. Also how cold, how much that soil gets heated and cooled off. We actually record soil temperature in our soil survey work. So the climate's going to influence the different soils that we have. Parent material, that's the geologic material the soil formed in. Talk more about that. Topography and relief, again, a soil, that's where that soil occurs on a landscape. If it's on a convex slope, it's going to shed water. Concave slope is going to collect water. Really steep soils, such as this one, is just going to have a very thin amount of soils due to erosion, gravity pulling that soil down the hill. If the area levels off, you're going to tend to have thicker soils and different soils there. Also, what side of a mountain it's on, south side or north side, is going to be different soils because of the climate also. And all of those factors over time. How old is the soil? Our soils here are very young. They started forming probably 18,000 years ago, but mainly about within the last 10,000 years. So very young soils here. If you were to drive 95 down through Staten Island, northern New Jersey, eventually you're going to go into areas where the soils are millions of years old, into the coastal plain. So we're in a completely different soil up here in the glaciated Northeast. So these factors work together to create these unique properties we call soil. So when I'm out mapping soil, these 5 factors are going through my head to determine, my soil landscape model that I'm working on or mapping. This is now a foundation or a big giant house in Portola right now. So that's right at that. So I'm going to focus on 2 of the main factors that influence our soils here. That's parent material and the relief factor. So the parent material is the geologic material that the soil formed in or on. That governs the types of minerals the soils has, the reaction or pH of the soil. If a soil formed in calcium carbonate limestone, it's going to have high pH. If it formed in acid granitic rocks, such as what we have here, it's going to have low pH and acid soils. The color of the soil is influenced by the parent material. Soils where I am here in Jamestown and Newport County tend to be black throughout. That's because of the bedrock in the area is a Carboniferous age shale. And as soon as we go over the bridge, we're into our granitic uplands, and our soil colors are much different. They're more of a yellowish color in our soils. And the chemical physical properties. There's an example of a parent material, volcanic ash coming up. That ash is going to land on the soil, and we're going to get a volcanic soil called an andesol, formed in volcanic glass. happening right now in Hawaii with a major eruption going on there. All of our parent materials in New England are glacial. We're in the glaciated Northeast during the Quaternary period, about 2.5 thousand years ago, ending about 11.7 thousand years ago. It was called a Pleistocene epoch. And after the glacier left, the last advance, we went into what's called a Holocene, which could be an interglacial stage, or we could enter a whole new geologic era called the Anthropocene. They're debating that right now, whether or not we've moved out of the Holocene and into this new era dominated by humans moving stuff all over the place. So during the Ice Age, there was 4 major times where snowfall exceeded snowmelt. Huge ice sheets moved from Canada, moved into our area, covered the land, lasted for a period of time, melted away, retreated back up north, and then came down again. The last advance is called the Wisconsin advance. So we're in what's called Wisconsin aged glacial deposits here. It covered all of New England. The top of Mount Washington has striations from the glacier. So it was at least a mile thick up in the New Hampshire area. And expanded to southern New England, Long Island, Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket formed the terminus of the moraine. You can see on this map here showing the ice margins. 26,000 years ago, the ice was sitting out here. Block Island is considered a terminal moraine. And you can see there's a lot of different lobes in the ice. So it's what we call lobate. By 2100, so 2600, the ice is out here. 2100 years ago, it was right up against southern Rhode Island. If you drive Route 1, to the north of you is the Charlestown End Moraine, and that's marked by this recessional margin here. And then pretty much by 18,000 years ago, the ice was free of Rhode Island. So it came down quickly and went away pretty quickly. So all of our soil parent materials are glacial and also post-glacial. So the first type of material, as the glacier is coming down, it's grinding material at its base and depositing stuff. And also within the ice, there's a whole bunch of material, sediment, boulders, you name it, is incorporated within the ice. So that material is referred to as glacial till. It's an unsorted, unstratified material deposited either beneath or within the glacial ice. We'll talk about the 2 different types of till. And it's basically a heterogeneous mixture of all particle sizes, anywhere from a boulder down to clay size. And it's our oldest deposit overlying most of the bedrock in the areas. So you can see this material here. You can't see any layers of strata or stratified sand and gravel. We got big boulders here, but there's also sand, silt, and clay packed in. So that's glacial till. And typically it's on these oval-shaped streamlined hills that all kind of orient in a certain direction. These are called drumlins. These would consist of what we call dense till or lodgement till. So the two major types of till are dense or lodgement till, such as this picture here. Very compact, difficult to dig through. That's the material deposited at the base of the ice. And then there's also something called ablation. That's an old term. We now call it superglacial meltout till. That was till that's deposited from the wasting of the ice. It's the stuff that was incorporated within the ice. And it tends not to be very dense, more sandy and that sort of thing. So we have different landforms of glacial till, drumlins, as I mentioned. Moraines are where the ice kind of stood still for a period and deposited material out. And then there's also ice contact area right near the ice that is deposited. So this basal till tends to have a very dense restrictive layer, which impedes downward water movement. So if you think of water trying to move through this stuff, it's very dense and hard. Bulk densities are up to 1.3 to almost 2.3 grams per cubic centimeter. Water can't move through rapidly through this stuff. So as a result, we end up with what's called perched water tables. And till is also characterized as having these large angular stones and boulders. So when you're walking into the pit at the Envirothon and you start seeing big stones and boulders, you should start thinking right away that you're in a glacial till type of soil. So just the hydrology that we get in this dense till, again, water doesn't move down. So when we get a lot of rainfall starting in our wet season, mid-December until early June, the water basically moves in, it hits that hard pan layer, and it just gets perched. So we end up with what's called a perched high water table. So if you got a house up on a hill, you think you're high and dry, and then lo and behold, March comes and we got a rainfall, and you're pumping water out of your basement, you probably are in dense till material. You can also get what's called wetlands creeping way up slope. So again, anytime you get a little bit of a concave, even way up on top of a hill, we can get wetlands occurring based on the landform. So one of the concerns is with these tills, they also are pretty difficult to put septic systems within them because they don't move the effluent downward, and you get a lot of breakout on those soils. The other dominant parent material, probably 30% of Rhode Island, is what's called glacial fluvial or outwash material. When a glacier was at its maximum extent, 26,000 years ago, so much ice water was held within the ice that sea level was depressed by 300 feet from what it is today. So again, this map down here shows you the ice is at its maximum extent. The shoreline was about 200 miles out before you hit the actual ocean water. So all of that water held within the ice as it started to melt and head back north is depositing huge amounts of material. As that material gets washed and cleaned, it gets rounded and stratified or sorted. So this is basically the plumbing of a glacier. Melt water coming out of here. And I don't know if you can see this guy on top or this person here is there for scale, kind of give you an idea. So all of this material that's up on this ice is going to get washed away and deposited into these meltwater streams. So the different landforms we have are plains, esker, kame, and deltas. This is just a profile showing a nice what's called top set or delta plain and a delta slope down below. So this is outwash material that was deposited into a large glacial lake at one time. Outwash is characterized as being just mainly sand and gravel sized particles. It tends to have rapid water movement. There is a video called Water Movement in Soil you should review. That's on the study guide. Of course, the link has moved. I'll update that, but that basically explains why water moves more rapidly where you have coarse material versus fine material. Just larger pores and gravity pulling that water down. Outwash tends to have apparent water tables, and there are actually kind of few limitations for most uses. So the demand is they're usually the first developed, such as Providence. Providence is mostly a big delta, nice sand and gravel type of soils, but they're also associated with aquifers. So here's some concerns. Again, we mentioned apparent water tables, so nothing's being perched. So you can typically interpret where the water is going to be if you look at your nearby ponds or wetlands. These large pore spaces in the sand and gravel have greater permeability or movement of the soil versus a till soil that would be here with just packed in with all your different particle sizes. So these tend to be associated with aquifer recharge areas, areas where you can get lots of water out of these areas due to the rapid movement and recharge of the soil, all based on how much rainfall we get. They also tend to have poor filtering capacity, meaning the water doesn't get treated, so you can end up with groundwater contamination in outwash soils. There's a list of other parent materials. The ones in yellow are ones that we also have here. You can read through these. We do have large organic swamp soils. They're called histosols. Some of them are upwards of, the deepest one I found in Rhode Island so far is Bowdish, which is about 45 feet of organic material within it. So it's a big kettle bog that was filled in with organic material. So huge carbon sinks in organic soils. We have what's called loess or aeolian. They're both material deposited by wind. Loess is material deposited by wind that's mostly silty. So we have what's called loess soils in southern Rhode Island here. Aeolian is just wind, usually sandy material depositing. Alluvium is your material deposited in modern day flood areas. So by looking at a soil, we can tell whether or not an area is subject to flooding, which you wouldn't want to put a house on. but a lot of people do. And we also have a new soil order coming out called Artisols. And these are soils formed by humans going in and moving the soil around and causing what's called human transported material, or HTM soils. So that's a whole new soil order that we're coming out with in our next version of taxonomy. And we're going in and mapping these anthropogenic areas in a lot more detail than we did in a previous soil survey. These post-glacial deposits, I mentioned wind. So on this profile here, you can see this is your stratified sand and gravel, but above it is nice silt loam material. This is the material deposited after the glacier left. So this is a soil that has loess on the surface, underlain by glacial outwash. So this loess capping actually gives our soils something good for farmers to work with. It holds a lot of water. It'd be pretty difficult to be, farming if you were just in this, unweathered sand and gravel type of material here. So most of our upland soils are capped with some kind of windblown, what we call a windblown mantle of either silt loam or sandy loam type of textures, which I'll talk about later. This just shows you a topo map with the two different major parent materials. You can see this is actually the University of Rhode Island, Route 138. If you ever drive past there, Upper College Road, North Road here, you'll be going down a hill, but you'll see it's all wetlands, a lot of wetlands all along Route 138 until you go across this Horn Brook and you go into this real flat area. So when you're looking at a topo map, these are lines of constant elevation. This is your 100-foot. These are 10-foot contours. So, so where you see the contours close together, it's steep. Where you see them far apart, it's flat. This is flat as a pancake here. So this would be your divide between glacial till soils to the east and your big outwash plain to the west. This is also part of the Chappuxet Aquifer for URI, and they did have a big dump right up in through here. Not the best place to put it. It's right up in here, which caused some groundwater issues with the Chappuxet Aquifer. All right, the other soil forming factor focus on is relief and landscape. So when you're walking in to the site, look at where you are in the landscape. Are you down low where water's going to flow, or are you up a high in an area up on a convex slope that's going to shed water? So when we're mapping soils, we're always looking at, we use the 3 L's: landscape position, landscape position, landscape position. Where are you on the landscape? We build these what's called soil patina, or a model of what we think the soil landscape relationship should be. And this is how we map soils, is we kind of have this model running in our head that we're on a glacial till area here. Up on the convex slope is going to be our well-drained till soils. As we start to level out, we get a little bit wetter, and then eventually into an organic soil. So that's what a soil mapper has in his head as he's walking on a drumlin in this situation here. Any questions on the parent material or soil forming factors? Still, hopefully I'm still on. All right.
You are.
Yep, still on. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So the next I'm going to go into some of the properties that you're going to have to look at on your soil when you're in the pit describing. The first one is breaking out what we call soil horizons. That's a layer that's approximately parallel to the surface and has distinct characteristics produced by soil forming processes. We use these soil horizons to classify soils and make interpretation. It's almost like reading a book. I can look at the layers and describe chemical, physical properties, and then from that we build our interpretations based on some of the stuff that we learn in college. So again, horizons, we keep it simple. It's A, B, C for the most part. There's a few other ones, such as an O horizon. That's an organic horizon, usually at the surface. In a wetland, it's going to be a thick black material. Black, anytime you see black, it's carbon. Carbon is one of our strongest coloring agents in the soil, and it gives the soil either a black color or a brownish color in through here if it's got less carbon. So our cutoff is 12% of our soil organic carbon. Anything greater than that, we call it organic, or an O horizon. When we get into our mineral horizons, the first one is an A, and that's a mineral horizon that is mixed with organic material. So this would be the A horizon here. It's the same material as this stuff below, except it's been mixed by a farmer, probably heavily manured for years to try to build up the organic matter content in the soil and provide some nutrients and also hold some water. The next horizon is called the B, and that's basically the soil, the horizon where stuff has moved in or there's been some kind of pedogenic process, an addition, a loss, a transfer, or a transformation in the soil. In this soil here, the only change we see is basically what we call a color development. So the iron oxide that's in the groundwater has coated the sand, silt, and clay particles, causing rust in the soil. So this yellowish brown color is basically just rusting in the soil. It does tell me that the soil is well aerated and probably has no issues with water. Below that, at 60 centimeters, we get into the unweathered geologic material, either glacial till, outwash, or some of the other parent materials in the area. And that is the C horizon. We also have R, capital R horizons, if you hit hard bedrock. I put this photo here because if you do end up going to New Brunswick, you're going to see a lot of what are called spodosols. And I know I was in Nova Scotia and, driving around that island, tons of outcrops along the road, kept wanting to stop because the spodosols are my favorite soil order here. That characterizes having this zone of bleaching or exiting of material. It's called an E horizon. And then it goes into an area where a lot of iron, aluminum, and humus material has accumulated. So that's called a B horizon in through here. So just wanted to put that there because if you end up going up there, you're going to probably see a lot of these soils. The other property we're going to have you use is a Munsell color chart. Every class should have one. You should also have examples of soil texture, which we'll talk about next. But we use color basically to identify some of the properties of the soil. You can't make any judgments. Like I can't look at this soil and say, oh, it's gray on the bottom, so that means it's got clay. We use the color patterns that we see in the soil to make interpretations. It tells us a lot about the chemical and physical properties, such as the depth to water table, the drainage, and some of the chemical constituents. You should know how to use a Munsell color, which I'll show you the chips later. In this particular profile, you can see these real patterns of bright colors and then gray colors. These are called redoxymorphic features. Redox is reduction and oxidation of iron. And we use these features to indicate where a water table will sit in the soil for a period of time. In this case, it probably comes right up to about 60 centimeters. I see some redox in through this layer here. The water causes anaerobic conditions within the soil. The iron oxide basically gets reduced and is mobile within the soil. And as the water table drops out, some of that iron oxide gets precipitated. And that's how we get the formation of these redox. So in the soil pit, if you do start seeing these real blotchy colors, even though the soil might be bone dry, you want to interpret that as being a water table. So this soil has a seasonal high water table at 60 centimeters, probably from December until June, when evapotranspiration takes over and starts to dry the soil. We also use color to identify what we call hydric soils or hydric soil indicators. You should have a color book here. The color book is broken out into 3 constituents of color. Hue is the dominant spectral series. So in this case, 10YR means it's yellow-red, 100% yellow-red. The value is the amount of light reflected. So on a Munsell color book, you'll see the soils go from really bright on top to really dark on the bottom. And then the chroma is the strength of the hue, going from bright to gray, from low chroma, which are grays, to the high chroma colors, which are brighter. So the notation is always hue, value, and chroma. So for this chip here, if I were to put my soil in back of that and say that it matches this color, I would document this as being a 10YR, 10 yellow-red. That's the hue, value of 7, chroma of 8. So it's always V over C, value over chroma. So this would be a nice, well-drained type of soil then, because I'm not seeing these gray colors that we would see in a wetland. The last property we're gonna have. What's that?
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, how do I do that? Oh,
What does ESHWT stand for?
Oh, that's estimated seasonal high water table. Sorry about that. Didn't have enough room. So that's basically we're estimating on this soil. There's no water here, but we're estimating that the seasonal high, when it is here, is at 60 centimeters. So yeah, just one of our abbreviations that I probably should have spelt out. Thanks for catching that. Modify my slides here.
Thank
The
you.
last property is texture. That's the amount of sand, silt, and clay we have in the soil. You should have samples. I'm not sure of how often we've given those to the school. I can get more when needed, but basically we're using field techniques to determine our soil textural class, USDA soil texture. Sand is anything from 2 millimeters down to 0.05 actually millimeters. Silt is 0.05 to 2 microns. And then clay is anything less than 2 microns, or 0.002 millimeters. So clay particles are very, very tiny. You actually need an electron microscope to be able to see a clay size particle there. So the differences between sand, silt, and clay is just the diameter or the size of that particle. So we do have something called the USDA textural triangle. This lists our 12 classes of soil texture. The way you use this is you only use it if you have lab data, meaning that we've ran a particle size and provided the amount of percent sand, silt, and clay. There may be a test question where I give you the lab results and you have to tell me what the texture is. The way you do this, up here we see it's 10. I'm saying that I got 10% clay. So on the percent clay axis, I'm going to draw a line across here. I got 60% sand. Percent sand is on the bottom, so 60%. I'm going to get the line. 30% silt. I'm going to come down, and the USDA texture plotting out here would be a sandy loam texture. So that means that it's close to a loam, which is kind of your, well mixture of all your particles, sand, silt, and clay, but it tends to be on the sandy side. 60% sand here. Most of our soils in New England, if you draw a line at 20% clay, we have, and in most cases, way less than 20% clay, but that's a good cutoff. So all of our textures are sand, loamy sand, sandy loam, silt loam, and a few areas in Narragansett and the Narragansett Bay, Aquidneck Island, we do have some loam textures. What you probably want to do is review the soil texture by field flow chart, which should be in the guide, and also probably the book that you've received to determine what the soil texture is. So we don't use when we're out mapping soils, we're not running particle size, which takes a long time to run. We're basically calibrating our fingers to determine that USDA soil texture class. And a good soil scientist, again, you spend probably a whole semester of school calibrating your hand to the different 12 different textural classes that we have. And when we do that texture, we're only looking at material less than 2 millimeters. Anything larger is what we consider to be a rock fragment and treated separately. So sand is basically gritty, think of sandpaper. We get real gritty, not sticky at all. Silt is very smooth, almost like talcum powder, but it's not sticky. And if you have a real clay soil, it's very sticky and it forms these large ribbons that you will see. And again, I mentioned most of our soils are this here. Why is texture important? It has a lot. It's probably the most important property we look at in a soil. It's the formation of the soil, whether or not you're getting clay moving through the soil, some of the mechanics, whether the soil can support buildings and that sort of thing, how water moves through the soil, the erosion or erodibility of the soil is determined by the texture. CEC is cation exchange capacity. That's just something that allows the soil to exchange positively charged ions to make it available for plants. Shrink swell is if you get certain types of clays in soils, they can expand when they get wet and shrink when they get dry. That's all determined by the type of clays that we would have. So again, most of textures in New England have very little clay. So when you're filling out that form, try to stay away from any of those clay textures that you might see. The last property is just soil drainage. That's the a depth to water or evidence of water. So on this little diagram, you're up on top of the hill. This is your area of your estimated seasonal high water table or your high water level. As we're going down the hill, it's getting wetter and wetter. So we start off with a well-drained soil up on top, moderately well-drained soil, getting a little bit wetter. We don't have somewhat poorly here. We just have poorly and very poorly drained. And the poorly and very poorly drained are our wetland soils that we have. So if you see a soil is a poorly drained soil in our soil survey, it's going to be a soil that meets a hydric factor, one of the 3 factors for wetlands. Wetlands are determined by soil, hydrology, and the type of plants growing on it. The last thing I'll talk about is just soil surveys. If I have time, I'll show a demo how we have everything now going from a published printed soil survey to the online map called Web Soil Survey. But we've been mapping soils for over 100 years throughout the country. We pretty much have most of the country done. The only areas left are federal lands out west, and in New England, probably the White Mountains is still in the process of being mapped in through here. So again, I'll show this how to use the Web Soil Survey, but I'll do that last. You should become familiar with using it. Try to use it at home or locate your house and see what soils you're mapped on. There's 3 basic steps that are explained on the website. And this is just an example of a map that you would get. This is an interpretive map showing you the hydric rating of the soil. So anything in red is going to be an obvious wetland area. Anything in green is not going to be. It's going to be your high and dry upland area. So this is one of the beauties, is you can create a nice map that provides a lot of these interpretations you'll see here. We have suitabilities and limitations for use, and then some of the soil properties. We've even added ecologic data into our soils, something called an ecologic site inventory. So we can even now provide information about the ecology of the soil, which is pretty cool. All right, on to the special topic. So your current 2023 issue is adapting to climate change. I suggest once they post the study guide that you go on there and read this. You're going to learn about the factors contributing to climate change, the effects of these changes, that sort of thing. So the web link is here. I don't think it's posted yet, but it should be. I don't know if you have somebody, a special speaker or somebody talking on climate change, but I recommend finding someone. If you do need someone, let me know there. So you should become familiar with what's called the carbon cycle, how carbon is cycled when it's up in the atmosphere as CO2. It blocks out, traps the sun, causing things to warm up. We've been pretty much every year, I think we hit a record heat. If you look at the records since we've been keeping time, every year it gets hotter and hotter. I mean, last summer was the hottest, driest summer ever recorded, at least here in Rhode Island here. So we're rapidly heating up there. So become familiar, and within regards to soil, how soils actually can sequester or keep carbon from going up into the atmosphere. Plant trees is what I always say to address climate change. The more trees we have, the better. This just shows you an outcrop of an organic soil. This was actually taken in Lubbock, Maine. But if you do go to New Brunswick, they actually have these peat cliffs. They're cliffs of just pure peat organic soils that have been eroded away by the waves. So this is 100% organic soil into here. There's no mineral material, just a huge amount of carbon within this soil. And they actually, in New Brunswick, they have a website where they have a whole commission, peat, because it's used for peat moss. If you go to the hardware store and buy a bag of peat moss, it probably comes from up in Canada where they're able to harvest. They don't have the wetland protections that we have on our organic soils. All of our organic soils are wetlands, so you can't mine them. They did mine them on Block Island. They used to use the peat for fuel out there because they don't have any trees. But again, just a nice outcrop showing you what a big organic soil has. This is one of my things that I studied a lot using some of our tools that we use in soil survey. We also, USDA, in 2010, we did what's called a rapid carbon assessment, or RACA. The person in our office was actually in charge of determining the carbon, amount of soil organic carbon and over 7,000 pedons or samples that we sampled throughout New England. And all of that information has been added to the database. And with that, we can produce what's called maps, soil maps showing the carbon stocks within the soil. So this was all done pretty much in our office and at the University of Rhode Island. All of these samples were collected and analyzed. A major event that we did. I wanted to also just point out or show you something a little bit how our science works. This is my last slide here, and then I'll let others talk on the climate stuff. Just give you an idea of how how these our soil surveys have been. We're able to collect this data. So this was a paper that came out in Nature, January of 2018. Climate scientists unlock secrets of blue carbon. Blue carbon is just carbon that's in an ocean. So it's dunes, marshes, beaches, and then ocean areas, what's called blue carbon. Tidal wetlands, such as this marsh in Oregon, can store large amounts of carbon. The next part of the article went on to say that the USGS collected 1,900 soil cores collected around the US to determine carbon stocks. When I saw that, it reached my, tweaked me. It said, oh, they got 1,900 soil cores. Maybe we can talk to the USGS and see if we can get these cores. And if they have data on them, we can add it to our database and then, increase the amount of data that we have. The other part of that was this little paragraph that said the estimates from a century's worth of soil surveys by the USDA, our SURGO, our soils data, showed more variation. And this report says that all marshes had the same amount of carbon, which we looked at that and said, we don't buy that, our soils people. And it goes on to say that estimates of the soil density below the surface may have been too high. As a result, the USGS person says the USDA overestimated carbon stocks in the region. Well, this shot a cannon over my bow because for the past 20 years, we've been working in coastal areas to improve our coastal and subaqueous soils. I read that and basically called out our data as not being useful for coastal blue carbon. So I shot off an email to our national folks, basically saying, this is my final plea. I've been begging you guys for years that we need to address our coastal blue carbon in tidal marshes because we have very little data, and basically this paper called us out. That led to the head cheese of our agency saying, our soils agency saying, write a plan for coastal blue carbon assessment, which we did. That provided funding to all the universities along the Eastern Seaboard and the Gulf to basically have grad students going out and collect this data. We don't collect this data per se. We usually rely on our land grant university to collect the data. And as a result, there is a Zoom presentation of a graduate paper that was a result of this funding. The link is in here. You might want to just look through that to see how science basically evolves into going from an article calling out our data to actually getting data to improve our soils mapping. So just wanted to show that how things kind of work within soil survey. And I think that's about it. Just showing you how we collect soil carbon data. We put a known amount of carbon into the cylinder here. We then oven dry it, and then we actually burn it. And the difference between the oven dry and the burnt is how much carbon is in the soil. It's called loss on ignition. From that, we, again, some of the thesis work is studying the carbon pools within different soils. And then from that, we can create soil maps showing, areas in green are higher areas of carbon sequestered. Areas in red have very little carbon in the soil. And I think that's it. This just goes onto the website, and I don't know, Max and Jillian, and if there's anything you wanted to talk about, if we have time, about USDA and some of the work we're doing. And I will open it up to those guys, and also if you have any questions. This is my little friend here. That's a cellophane bee in the soil, and he's looking at you. Any other
think-
questions on the soil part or?
I think Max is gonna chime in, about our programs and I'll fill in as needed.
Yeah, sure. Can I share? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right.
Like, do I have to stop or?
No, no.
It should be
I
on the
think I can
bottom. It
just-
should say share screen.
Yeah, I think I can just jump in.
Okay.
I found this
Great.
graphic recently. I thought this would maybe be a little helpful. Just because you're talking about soil and soil health relating to, climate change. At NRCS, we offer all sorts of practices to farmers and other private landowners. And a lot of them can be used to help mitigate some, effects of climate change. Like cover cropping, using no-till practices, mulching. We offer tree and shrub establishment, native grassland plantings, and all those things in their own way can help contribute to carbon sequestering, increasing soil health, retaining soil moisture, adding soil organic matter. Yeah. And, here there's like the 4 basic principles, minimize disturbance with no-till. That's very helpful for soil health, crop rotation, can sequester carbon, and also, can help with erosion, which is not a good thing, polluting waterways. Pollinator plantings, help keep native, bee populations, all sorts of pollinators alive. Anything you want to add, Jill?
We
Um,
also do forestry, a lot of forestry, right? Forest
Oh, yeah.
legacy and
Mhm.
trying to put easements. Easement basically protects forested area. We for a long time, we have easements on ag land, agricultural land. So they don't get developed. I think now we can put them on forest areas to try to, again, as I say, plant trees to combat climate change. They absorb CO2 and release oxygen.
Yeah, we do a lot of like wildlife practices as well. So Jim, with your planting trees, we do a lot of that. Which has some, the intended purpose is for wildlife habitat and food, but as Jim mentioned, it also has some other benefits.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
I did show that first slide with NRCS and, climate change is one of our current priorities, so.
Yeah.
New
And with like,
administration came in and,
yeah, and like you
lot of-
mentioned, Jim, like, we're getting more extreme and variable weather like hurricanes, floods, mudslides. So, the more ground cover you have, the less erosion you'll have. So that could help with like, mudslides and, in the future, or, flooding, like you could do, plantings along rivers and streams, to help keep those banks more stable, stuff like that.
So there's a,
can hear you, Pete. You're muted.
You're muted there.
okay, there's a question about carbon in the soil. Does soil with a lot of carbon protect the area from development? And then how do we use that carbon data?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it does actually. When you say a soil that has a lot of carbon, to me, that means it's a wetland soil. So wetlands are basically characterized as having their soils that formed in waterlogged conditions. So they don't have aerobic decomposition. They undergo anaerobic decomposition, which is much slower. So a wetland soil is characterized as having very thick organic surface areas. And in some cases, complete, organic type of material, greater than 12% soil organic carbon is an organic horizon. So anytime you have a soil that has a lot of carbon, it's probably associated with a wetland. Wetlands were protected under the 1972 Clean Water Act, which is still, we're always battling that in the courts, whether or not we can protect wetlands. But within Rhode Island and all of New England, there's also a state wetland protection program. So wetlands are protected by not just federal, but also state programs. So hopefully we're able, even if the Clean Water Act, the wetland protection part goes away, within New England, we'll still be protecting our wetlands. And how do we use carbon data? A lot of that goes to some of the, if you go back and listen to some of the things the politicians and everything are pushing is basically carbon banking. If you can show that you are sequestering a lot of carbon on your soil, you should get what's called carbon credits. So that data is used there, but it's also a lot of our soil carbon data that we've been spending years and years and collecting is basically going into our database. So as I showed that map of the subaqueous soils, we can also generate that map on land to show which areas have higher carbon and probably worth protecting. And again, it's probably going to correlate with where the wetland soils are. So you'll hear that term carbon banking or, carbon credits. There's also a lot of research going on, one of the major land use changes going on now is putting solar power plants. I don't like to call them solar farms because they're not a farm. They're solar generating plants where they cut down all the trees and then put these solar panels up. So is that good or bad? Well, one way to tell is to determine how much, by cutting down the trees, how much above ground biomass we're losing and probably getting burnt off, but also what's no longer going into the soil. So now we know exactly how much carbon is in that soil. Once those trees are gone, that carbon is slowly going to burn off and go into the air. So we can, again, at least have some kind of snapshot in time as to what the carbon used to be in those soils. Okay, is there still time to do web soil survey demo or are we out? I can't even see my clock. Oh, Max, I think you're still on.
Just about 3:30.
3:30.
Ask Robin how long she'd like to stay on.
Yeah, do you want to see the web soil survey or are you good? I don't know how long they usually go for these talks there. I just see, thank you. So,
Oh,
maybe they fell asleep. We're done. Okay. Yeah. So again, I would have your students try to use web soil survey. If they do have any issues, have them get in touch with me. We can show you how to use a web soil survey. It is going to be part of the exam or the test there. So make sure you know how to pull up soils data. All righty.
Thank you, Jim.
thank you very much,
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah,
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen from NRCS. Always appreciate your assistance.
And Germany is losing. That's good.
Okay,
World Cup. Oh, USA.
yeah, gonna be up early on Saturday morning.
I'll be at my brewery at 10 o'clock. We're opening early.
Robin,
Come to Jamestown and
doing
watch.
this again on the 6th. And the 15th. Barring anything else, thank you all for contributing.
Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thanks.